Hey everyone, Dave, Dr. Shock Becker here, and got an idea for another video. I thought I would put it together real quick. In one of the previous videos where I was taking you through my video collection, or my DVD Blu-ray collection, and how I've got it hidden throughout this room here, when I opened the closet, there were a group of boxes sitting on a bookshelf, and in those boxes were the Blu-rays and DVDs that I didn't break out. They were either collector's editions or whatnot, and I didn't break them out and put them into the books, into the various books with the liner notes and the discs, as I did for the majority of my collection. One of those boxes had Blu-Ray Digibooks in them, which for obvious reasons I didn't want to break up. It's a nice little collectible thing, having these Digibooks with the Blu-ray disc. So I figured I'd go through a handful of those today. I think there's probably between 25 and 30 in the box. I grabbed 8 of them here that I wanted to talk about. And the first one needs, well, I don't think it needs any introduction. It is the original King Kong. When I was a kid, every Sunday we would get the TV Week, listing all of the new shows for the week and the times they were playing and what channels. There was a section for movies. I would peruse it every single Sunday looking for 2 movies, the original King Kong and the original Mighty Joe Young. I loved them both, and I'm talking I was probably like 10, 11 years old at this time, and these were just, I wanted to watch them every time they were on. Didn't have a VCR, didn't have any way of recording them at this point, and I just didn't want to miss these movies whenever they played. And the original King Kong, of course, is it's awesome. It's the movie that inspired Ray Harryhausen to take up stop motion. It's one of the all-time great movies, in my opinion. Yeah, and it's something I'd say everybody should see, but I'm sure a lot of people have already seen it and watch it as regularly as I do. But it's a great one. All right. Well, moving along, and pardon me if my eyes keep wandering. I keep looking at myself and forgetting to look at the actual camera there. The next one is another sort of classic horror film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. This one, there's a bit of a history with my family. My father was stationed in Vietnam from 1966 to 1967. And when he was pulling guard duty, him and the guy he was pulling guard duty with, they would do 12 hours on and 12 hours off. Well, the guy he was doing the guard duty with had said to him, look, I'll take the first shift today. You can have the next shift. Go get something to eat, watch the movie, and I'll see you back here in 12 hours. Well, the movie that was playing that my father saw was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And he said, you haven't quite experienced guard duty, staring out into a pitch black jungle until, after seeing this movie. He said he didn't blink, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. The scene with the rat especially, he said, got to him. But, this movie had him wide awake for that 12-hour shift. And Bette Davis, one of the reasons I love it is Bette Davis is my all-time favorite actress. She's been great in so many things, of Human Bondage, The Letter, Jezebel, The Star, and her performance in this movie is phenomenal. I mean, her and Joan Crawford really did hate each other. I know that they recently did a TV miniseries about the making of this movie and the relationship between the two. These two could not stand each other, no doubt about it. And I think that just sort of adds to the lure of the film, and the tension between the two of them as they were making the movie. It's tangible, and it's just it's awesome. All right, moving along. Number 3 is The Right Stuff. We got our first VCR in 1983. It was the summer of 83. I remember because I had graduated 8th grade. And when the Oscars were announced in 84 for the films of 1983, we, by that point, had joined we had membership at a video rental store. The first one in our area, Premier Video. And I was making it a point to watch as many of the Oscar-nominated movies as I could before the awards. And the ones up for especially the ones up for Best Picture that year, and the ones that were up for Best Picture were The Right Stuff, Terms of Endearment, Tender Mercies, The Big Chill. Oh, what's the 5th one? Is it Silkwood? Was it Silkwood nominated for Best Picture? Or was that the year The Dresser? Maybe that was the year The Dresser came out, the Tom Courtenay, Albert Finney movie. Maybe that was the 5th. I can't remember. I'm not sure what the 5th one was. It might have been The Dresser. It might have been Silkwood. But anyway, The Right Stuff. I saw this. It was 2 tapes, obviously, because it's a long movie. It's 3.5 hours. It's about the Mercury astronauts. You know, the formation of those original 7 astronauts. But even before that, it's about test pilots, and it's got Chuck Yeager in it. I love the way this movie opens. It's got that's like flying through the air, and voiceovers. There is a demon that lives in the air, and then the music swells, and it's just it really pulled me in right away, and I couldn't wait, and I just loved this movie. It was my first major disappointment with the Oscars when Terms of Endearment won over The Right Stuff. Not that Terms of Endearment is a bad movie. It is not. It is a damn fine film. But for me, The Right Stuff is could be one of the 20 best movies of the 1980s, actually. I loved it that much. All right, we are continuing along. Staying in the 1980s with Clash of the Titans. All right, Clash of the Titans. Speaking of Ray Harryhausen, this was the last movie that he did the stop motion effects for. And you know what? It's like Jason and the Argonauts, like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, like all of the movies that Ray Harryhausen worked on, his effects are phenomenal in this. I was lucky enough to catch this on the big screen. Some friends and I went in 1981 to the theater. So I did get to see a Ray Harryhausen effects film on the big screen, and it was amazing. And being into Greek mythology at the time, it even added to it a little bit more. It's a story of Perseus and trying to save he falls in love with, I can't remember the name of the princess right now, but he ends up having to save her from the Kraken. He battles the Medusa and Calibos, and just dealing with the Greek gods played by Shakespearean actors like Laurence Olivier and Maggie Smith, and it's phenomenal. I love this movie. I can watch it anytime, and the battle with the Medusa, I think, is my favorite part of the film, and it's something I'll always remember because it scared me. I was legitimately scared. In 81, I was 12. So I was like on the edge of my seat watching that. But if you haven't seen this, I know that they remade it recently. It's nothing like the original. It can't hold a candle to it, in my opinion. I didn't hate the remake, but I can't, I'd recommend this one over that any day. Moving along to the next Digibook, Dr. Strangelove. I mean, so much has been said about Kubrick and just how amazing he was. I'm not sure if I opened any of the pages for Clash of the Titans. I might not have. Not that I'm spending any time really on those pages, but just kind of interesting to see what are in these books, I guess. 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, just so many incredible movies by Stanley Kubrick, and Dr. Strangelove is one of them. Peter Sellers plays 3 roles in this. He plays the U.S. president. He plays a British soldier, sort of second in command under Jack D. Ripper, Sterling Hayden's insane base commander, who kind of starts the story off. It's basically about he launches a nuclear attack on Russia because he's convinced that they are infiltrating the U.S. and sapping our precious bodily fluids. And his reasoning behind that is pretty funny, actually. And then, of course, Peter Sellers also plays the title character of Dr. Strangelove, a German scientist brought in to help with the U.S. Nuclear program. George C. Scott is hilarious as Buck, General Buck. I can't remember his last name now. Turgison, is it? And he's great in the film as well. Peter Sellers is awesome. Slim Pickens plays one of the captain of one of the planes heading into Russia to drop the bomb. But it's Peter Sellers is playing 3 different roles. He's great. I mean, not that Kubrick was very happy because he ended up paying like 40% of the budget to Peter Sellers. I think Kubrick made the sort of backhanded compliment that I got 3 performances for the price of 6 or something like that. But you can't take anything away from how awesome Peter Sellers was in this movie. And it's a very funny film, and just another Kubrick masterpiece. Next is a film I saw a lot as a kid on TV, because I think my father watched it several times, and it is Papillon. The original Papillon, starring Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, based on a true story about a French prisoner on Devil's Island who attempts an escape and eventually, I think, succeeded at escaping. And, just sort of the hellish life that these prisoners experienced on Devil's Island, or just in general in the French penal system. It's kind of a bold statement, but for me, this is without a doubt Steve McQueen's finest performance, I think, in Papillon. He is amazing in this. Dustin Hoffman is great too. I know that there was tension between the two of them making this movie. There was tension between Steve McQueen and a lot of people. Steve McQueen was a very standoffish sort of actor. When you go back to The Magnificent Seven, how him and Yul Brynner, there was a lot of friction between them. He had it in his contract for The Towering Inferno that him and Paul Newman had to have the same exact number of lines. That's why Paul Newman disappears for such a large portion of that movie, because Paul Newman was in so much at the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of it, Steve McQueen had to catch up. So Steve McQueen is that sort of actor, and there was definitely tension between the two of them. I think Dustin Hoffman still refers to, or for years, and maybe not anymore, referred to Steve McQueen as that son of a bitch. But the movie itself is, I don't know, I think it's very well made, and it really is, for me, Steve McQueen's finest performance. All right. Getting towards the end here, got 2 more, and one of them, Poltergeist. Okay, Poltergeist I saw during its first run in 1982. It has Steven Spielberg's name on it. So it was I've told this story on the podcast, on Horror Movie Podcast and Land of the Creeps, I'm sure several times now. My friends and I went on a beautiful sunny summer afternoon to the theater to see Poltergeist, and we didn't realize that it was a horror movie. We had no idea at the time what a poltergeist was. I think at this point in 1982, I was still 12, going on 13, and wasn't quite ready for what Poltergeist actually was. Again, we were going on my love of Steven Spielberg and Raiders of the Lost Ark is what pulled me into Poltergeist. Is not directed by Spielberg. There's that that all a little bit of controversy as well. Spielberg did have something to do with it, and maybe he did direct it, but it's a Tobe Hooper directed film. And I think it's a nice blend of a Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg movie because it is gruesome at times, much like Tobe Hooper's work, especially Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it's the family, the depiction of family life, and you really do care for this family at the center of it all that made Poltergeist the movie it is, and that's Spielberg. I mean, you look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and a lot of his output around this time. He was great at taking that family dynamic and making it special, and he definitely does that with Poltergeist as well. This was the very first movie I ever recorded off of cable, and thus it is the very first movie I ever owned, and I can't quite tell you what that meant to a young film fan. The fact that I could now watch a movie anytime I wanted to. And this was the first one. I remember holding that videotape saying, I now own Poltergeist. I own this movie. I can watch it whenever I want. And wow. I mean, that's why I think I'm always going to be a physical media guy, because that was such a rush to say, hey, I own a movie, because I went years as a film fan wondering if I would ever see my favorite movies again. And knowing there was a good chance I might not. I got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark 3 times in the theater, and my family was not big on that. When you saw a movie once, that was it. And I did not live within even biking distance of a movie theater. There were highways that we had to go on at this. It was like to get to the King of Prussia Mall and so forth from where we lived. So I couldn't even bike to a movie theater. I had to rely on my parents taking me, and they were not big on spending twice to see the same movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark I got to see 3 times, once, and then the other time I just pestered the hell out of them. They said, fine, we'll take you to see it again. And then my neighbor came over about a couple weeks later and said, I haven't seen that yet. And his wife didn't want to go, and would either me or my brother be interested in going? And yes. So I got to see that 3 times, which was unheard of. I only saw Poltergeist once, but it was my love of Raiders of the Lost Ark that brought me to it, and I continue to love Poltergeist to this day. And we're going to close out this video with a movie I talked about recently on Land of the Creeps, and actually did something I never thought I would do on a podcast. Little Shop of Horrors, a musical, and I actually sang a song from this movie, actually. Little Shop of Horrors. I don't know what to say. See, now this is the director's cut in this Blu-ray, the Frank Oz. What he did was the ending was changed. The ending of this movie was much different from what fans of the film for many years remember. It was much darker and longer, and there was entire sequences of these creatures from space. The Audrey 2, as it was called in this movie, and attacking cities and whatnot. It took the special effects guy, or the guy who created these creatures and all of these sequences, a year to put them together. And one test screening, they pulled all that out of the movie. Frank Oz said it was the most difficult call he ever had to make, was to tell this guy that the year you dedicated to this movie may never see the light of day, and he was so happy to put it back into this film. It's the story of Seymour, played by Rick Moranis, falls in love with Audrey, who's dating a rather sadistic dentist, played by Steve Martin. It's a musical, some great music. Suddenly Seymour was the song I chose to sing on the recent episode of Land of the Creeps. and it's from this movie. And it's just, it's one of those movies that when I first saw it, I knew I was going to love it. And as much as I like Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I think I actually have a digibook of Rocky Horror Picture Show as well, Little Shop of Horrors is always going to be my favorite musical horror film, or musical horror themed film. There's just so much to love about it. All right, so I'm going to close that out now. Again, I'm new at doing these videos, so forgive the glitches, forgive the shaky camera, forgive my eyes wandering at times. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I will continue to do videos and hopefully get better at them as I go along. And do more of, peering into my collection as I've done a few times now. And, let me know if you have any requests. I know some people have said for the 60s, for the 80s, and I do plan to pull out those books, those, I guess, the cases for those decades and go through them like I did for the 1970s in a previous video. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.